Hello, Canucks fans. Welcome back to another episode of Canucks Conversation, brought to you by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today, but on a huge range of markets. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Be sure to use code NATION when you sign up for an account. My name is Dave Gugelli. I was joined by Harman. He dipped out for a second, but he'll be back. Harman is going to join us in a second here. Our technical producer is Jacob Lazar. Did you just fix your hair?
No, that was
Okay.
that was not it.
Okay, no worries. You don't need to say anything else. Thought you just went to go fix your hair. Turn off the camera, fix the hair. Harm, how's it going?
It's I'm doing well. Yeah, a little bit scrambled to start the show, I'm not gonna lie. But at the same time, after the game last night, there's a lot to process, and there's so much to get into that I'm excited to talk about the game.
All right, and in the chat, we have a few people. We're going to get more throughout the show, so I do want to mention our Super Chat. Our Super Chat charity partner this season is the BC Mental Health Foundation. You want to make sure your question or comment gets on the show, hit us with a Super Chat. Proceeds from our Super Chat will go to the BC Mental Health Foundation, changing the face of mental health and addiction by supporting breakthroughs in care, public understanding, research, and knowledge exchange. Nick Pocek has a theory. Luongo moment for Harm. No, Nick, he was gone for like 5 seconds. It wasn't long. It wasn't a Luongo moment.
It was a hoodie in the background that I was like, oh, this looks messy, so I just like had to toss it out.
I wish you hadn't told us that. I wish we could have kept guessing. But I understand why you want to clear the air. Hey, maybe there's a lesson there for the Canucks on how to deal with situations when people start making theories up. Okay, let's get into last night's game, Harm. Canucks with another overtime loss in Montreal. I want to start talking about this game where I think the biggest story is, and that's JT Miller. 2 goals, 2 assists, a driver at 5-on-5, a Hughes-like performance where nobody else seemed to be going last night, and JT, despite that, just dragged everyone into the fight, kept them in that game. Really, JT's the reason this game got to overtime, right? Like JT has something to do with every single goal the Canucks score. Again, that's a Hughes-like performance, and it's just something we haven't seen from JT at all this season.
Yeah, absolutely. You hope it's something that he can build on because he was a monster. It's by far the best game he's had this season. I mean, just starting with the one-timer goal off Hoglander's pass, I love that it wasn't just that he uncorked that one-timer with so much velocity, but also the wherewithal to not overshoot it and ensure that he was also like on target accuracy wise. Now, I've talked to Miller in the past of the years where he knows his shot is very hard, but he also knows that he's not always the most accurate with his one-timers. And there have been times in the past where sometimes he'll load up for a one-timer on, let's say, the right side of the power play, and it's a howitzer, but it's nowhere near the net. And what I really like about the release there was he still found a way to get a ton of velocity with it, but he also placed it really well. He wasn't overshooting it. So that was brilliant. I mean, very few players can beat a goaltender from that far out. And then, I mean, just the passes on some of his other assists as well to spring originally Besser on the breakout, which led to Lekkerimiki's 2-on-1 goal was brilliant. He was just finding seams all night. I mean, the other assist he had where he was selling shot the entire way and then fed DeBrusque for what was essentially an open net for him because everybody was biting on the shot. Of course, the second goal off Lekkerimiki's rebound as well. He was a driver all night. And if he can find, I mean, I'm not talking about finding the level of play where he's putting up 4 points every night, but if he can be a consistent 5-on-5 creator, that will go a long way towards helping the Canucks find another gear at even strength.
You're hoping it's a building block. Great game for JT Miller. We're going to talk about him throughout the show. That first line as a whole was great. They put up really, really solid underlying numbers. They were a big focus of the statsies. Jonathan Lekkerimaki really shined in that game, in my mind. He took a big hit early on, which you don't love to see, obviously, on a young player like that. I do think that, and I don't think this is really a hot take, but I do think he clearly has some maturing to do physically, I think, and just to kind of get his feet wet. And I think this is the place to do it. to start to understand a little bit more about when guys are going to hit you, what it's going to feel like when guys hit you, how to avoid getting hit, how to avoid contact, but also not play scared and not do the swing thing that Tocchet hates. Lots of lessons, I think, for Jonathan Lekkerimaki to learn. But one thing that we can't deny is that he fit well last night, and that shot is lethal. That shot is such a weapon for Jonathan Lekkerimaki.
It's not just the shot too; it's the deception where he was looking towards Myers as if he was going to pass it the entire way. So he sort of fooled the defender and the goaltender on that one, which, by the way, Myers deserves a lot of credit too. That's the one part of that play where we can give credit to Miller for the slick breakout pass, Besser for also making a nice feed to spring Lekkerimaki the great shot. But if Myers doesn't spot that opportunity to jump up in the play, it's a one-on-one. And at that point, both Montembeault and the defenseman know that Lekkermaki's only option is a shot. I guarantee you it's not a goal if it's just a one-on-one situation, because they already know what's coming. Whereas Myers making the aggressive read, using his long strides to get up the ice and turn it into a 2-on-1, that's where the defenseman had to be wary of the pass across. That's where Montembeault had to be wary of the potential passing threat as well. And that's really what drives a lot of offense at 5-on-5 and the power play, is when there are multiple threats and options for the player with the puck. Same thing with DeBrusk's goal, right? If Miller didn't have multiple options with the shot and the pass, it's a lot easier to read and predict and defend. So Myers deserves credit there. But to go back to Lekkerimaki, I mean, yeah, it's beautiful release on that shot. I also liked that he had a play in the third period where he found Besser for a shot pass. And again, I think it's not just the release that he has, but his IQ is clearly already an asset at the NHL level. He'll need to beef up in time, but it was a really impressive performance by him.
For now, next game's against Washington. What's your take, Harm? Like, you keep that first line together, right? Even though you lost, even though he's on an emergency recall or whatever it is he's on, like Lekkerimaki, I don't want to proclaim after one game, his sixth NHL game, that, yeah, he's here to stay. But for now, Lekkerimaki should be here to stay. I like him on that line a lot.
He 100% deserves another shot, especially because players with his scoring profile in the AHL at the same age as him, they more often than not tend to become NHL contributors at some point in that sort of respective season. Again, it goes back to comps related to players in the same sort of like draft plus 3 season. And there are tons of examples. And so even just based off that, it's guys with this track record of scoring at the AHL tend to be capable of producing in the big league, maybe not on a full-time basis, but enough to where, especially after a performance like that against the Canadiens, he deserves more rope to see what he can do.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. Just going through for the rest of last night's game as we break it all down. Nils Hoglander, you ready to talk about Nils Hoglander? Scored 24 goals last year, Harm. He made a great pass to Miller for that one-timer goal. You just pointed it out. But the Nils Hoglander experience started to turn around 2 games ago. Takes a pretty untimely penalty late in the third when usually Tocchet wouldn't trust him to be out there. But he did because he's been feeling it. He's been playing great. Takes the... Can we call it a dumb penalty? Like, I would call it a dumb penalty. Like, people are saying, oh, Anderson ran into him. Come on. Like, he extends his arms. He's the one that maybe not initiates contact, but he certainly follows through on the contact rather than avoiding the contact. Like, I'm sorry. That was a bad penalty for Hoglander to take. And I recognize also that the Amazon broadcast didn't show it because I was thinking to myself, the one they showed was like a really, really soft little nudge on Lane Hudson. And I was like, that's a penalty. And we tweeted it out, or I tweeted it out after. Insider Baseball, Harman texted me that, and I tweeted it out. But anyways, we tweeted it out, and it was a penalty. The play on Anderson, it certainly was. Montreal goes on to score on the power play in overtime.
It's so unfortunate, too, because not just the assist, but on a shift-by-shift basis, I thought that was one of Hoglander's better games of the year. And I was thinking, these are the types of performances that if he can continue building some confidence will help get him out of the doghouse, even if it just is temporarily. But then it's just game management. Last minute of the game when you don't have your stick, and he didn't deserve a penalty with respect to how he was hounding Hudson. but he should know that it was still kind of borderline to where you can't then cross the line after, especially when you don't have your stick. It's just going to stand out that much more. And like you said, it's the extending his arms out. There's absolutely no need for him to shove Anderson in that spot there. It's not as if he was preventing some type of scoring chance. It just wasn't a productive play by any means. And to take that penalty in that instance is just unacceptable, and it derailed a lot of the good things that he was doing with the speed, with his forechecking, with some of the plays that he was spotting. It's just it feels like anytime he looks to be taking a half step forward, he takes another half step backwards, and it's just unfortunate.
Just unfortunate. The Nils Hoglander 24-25 season. Nello in the chat about the OT sequence said Nucks won the face-off in OT. They should have played a bit of keep away instead of dumping it in to the Habs zone. This is fun. You know, I like talking about hockey philosophy. If I ran a team, if you ran a team, what would we do? I recognize that you would want to play a little bit of keep away, and I think I would do the same, but I also don't know if I would tell my players, like, hey, curl back, even though we're shorthanded, curl back in overtime and head back there. But I do like the idea, though. I like the idea of playing some keep away. But yeah, Canucks obviously sent it in, and then the Habs go back the other way and score. What's your take? You're shorthanded in overtime. You win the faceoff. What do you do?
I think it's context dependent. I didn't have a huge problem with the decision to clear there. Their penalty kill, I know they got burned twice against Canadiens, but the PK has been pretty good overall. And yeah, there are moments where even in regulation time, I think it was a play where Suter was about to go off, but the puck was sort of rimmed around the wall. And so instead of going straight to the bench, he went and retrieved the puck. And I thought, okay, that's an opportunity to maybe pass it back to a defenseman and play a little bit of keep away, and they didn't. They don't follow that philosophy, but because the PK as a whole has been pretty solid this year, I'm not really going to criticize them for that. And ultimately, I don't think that's the major reason for why they lost, why they got scored on, and why they lost the game anyway.
Fair enough. When we look at the schedule, though, Harm, like I brought up Washington being the next team, like this was the most winnable game of the road trip. And Montreal came out hard. Like, not taking anything away from Montreal. They were playing like it was a game one of the playoffs. They were throwing a ton of hits early. They had the energy. They had everything you'd want to see from Montreal, if you're a Habs fan. I looked at that game, though, as the one that was like, okay, well, the Canucks will win that, but how many more are they going to win? They pick up a point, but doesn't really mean much when you're leading after two periods. I saw Dan Riccio tweet this out. That's the 6th overtime loss for the Canucks this season when they are leading after two periods. That just can't happen. It just can't happen. It hurts more that it came in what was JT Miller's best game of the season. It hurts more that it was in Hughes' return. But ultimately, it probably hurts the most that it was the first game of a road trip where there's not many games that you're going to face opponents as bad as Montreal.
Absolutely. Especially, one thing I will say is I've seen a lot of people wondering about, oh, well, they blew into the 3-1 lead, and absolutely that's unacceptable. But I don't think it's something to do with the Canucks play exceptionally well to the point where they gain a lead, and then when they gain the lead, then they forget how to play hockey. I think it's a symptom of them through all game states, whether they're trailing, whether they're tied, whether they're leading, being unable to sustain consistent offensive zone pressure. I really think it's that simple. I don't think it's, oh, we get the lead and we don't know how to manage it. I think it's a case where, again, over the last month, 6 weeks, whatever you want to call it, they're one of the worst teams in the NHL in terms of controlling 5-on-5 play. They don't generate anything offensively. And controlling possession of the puck, spending time in the O-zone, stacking heavy shifts, cycling the other team, wearing them down.
Yep.
That's the best way to protect it. And when you go back to the Canucks last year, they were decisively one of the better teams in the NHL at controlling 5-on-5 play in all game states. And when you look at the formula for how they were holding on to leads, it wasn't just, okay, pack the slot and sit back, park the bus defensively, and we're just never going to make defensive mistakes. It was where, like, we have a really effective strategy of our forecheck is really effective. We're going to make it hell for the other team to break the puck out. we're going to control the puck down low, cycle it up high, and just play keep away in the offensive zone. And how many times have the Canucks been able to do that this season? I haven't seen that nearly enough, and I think that's a reason why they've been struggling to hold on to leads. It's just in any game state, they don't have control of the puck enough, and I think a lot of that goes back to the defense core that they're icing.
So people will hear what you just said and say coaching, they'll say players, they'll say management. I think we agree it goes back to players and management the most, mostly because we've seen Rick Tocchet coach this team and not do what you just said. Like you just talked about how last year it was different. So are we talking about what I love to talk about? That everything starts at the back end, and when you can't get the puck up to your forwards and you can't generate sustained offensive zone pressure and you're always gaining the red line, dumping it in and going for a line change, that's going to lead to losing games? Are we in agreement there that this is mostly to do with the weak back end?
Absolutely. I think that's by far the primary culprit. I also look at Carson Soucy in that game. Only 3 shifts in
there you go.
In the third period, I believe. His overall time on ice was under 15 minutes, according to Natural Stat Trick. He had a brutal sequence on one of the second period goals against where, and this has been a consistent theme where his reads are off the mark and he'll get caught out of position quite often. He initially allowed a 2-on-1 chance to Newhook, and then later on in the shift, he had a chance to clear the puck out of the defensive zone. He failed to clear, and I believe that led to the Caden Gooley goal in the second period that brought the Habs within one. He's just been stacking mistakes on top of mistakes, unable to move the puck, out of position defensively. And he's the type of player that last year, when it came to holding leads and being defensively responsible, was a key cog for them. So he's taken a massive step back. Now, part of it is just the personnel, but I also believe that at a certain point, when the team struggles to move the puck to this extent, and again, he's not going to magically fix the back end issues, but I still don't understand why Erik Brannstrom is out of the lineup, especially when you see whether it's Soucy making mistakes that often or Noah Juulsen logging the types of minutes that he has and his form at even strength over the last handful of games. Like, to me, I don't think this Canucks blue line can afford to have all of Juulsen, Forbert, and Desharnais in the lineup at the same time. And I get it for the PK reasons and the size or whatever, but to me, their skill set is redundant and they need defensemen that can transition the puck out of the zone. Otherwise, it's just going to be a struggle until Hronek gets back to transition it out of their own zone and control puck possession.
It goes back to the conversation we had, I think it was last week when we were talking about Tom Hoglander, and I said I really want to see him, and we were talking about how it might be tough because he's not going to be as great of a penalty killer as Noah Juulsen. It goes back to that conversation when we talk about Erik Brannstrom as well, where, like, look, Hollander's going to kill penalties. Like, Brannstrom's not going to kill penalties. I think he's killed 10 minutes, and it maybe is worth mentioning that the Canucks haven't given up a goal. You can go check that, folks. They haven't given up a goal in the 10 minutes that Erik Brannstrom spent penalty killing when other guys have taken penalties. But I digress. It goes back to this conversation of, okay, well, how much help do you need at 5-on-5 and how much help do you need on the PK? And I think the pros and cons, when you weigh the benefits of having Noah Juulsen or any of those guys that you just mentioned at 5-on-5 compared to the PK, I guess Erik Brannstrom, where you're not going to get anything on the PK, but you're going to get more help at 5-on-5, I think the choice is clear. Erik Brannstrom needs to be in this lineup, and I think we absolutely agree on that.
Well, also just like look at the Canadiens blue line. The Canadiens blue line isn't great. It's probably below average in the NHL. But when you have guys like they have a number of players who can move the puck. They got Hudson, who, by the way, looked like Quinn Hughes in that game. But outside of Hudson, too, like Matheson can really skate the puck. Alex Carrier, who they recently acquired from Nashville, has been a really solid addition for them. Caden Gooley, he's a stay-at-home shutdown guy first, but he has enough puck skills to help on the breakout. And when you look at the start of that game and why the Canadiens are all over the Canucks in the first 10 minutes, it's because Montreal's breakouts were quick, they were decisive, they were efficient, and that allowed their forward group as well to attack with a lot of speed, whereas in comparison, the Canucks looked like they were stuck in the mud And it's concerning to me that in that game, it isn't just, oh, the Canucks blew a lead. It's the Canadiens outplayed the Canucks for most of the game when it came to shots, scoring chances, the overall flow. And outside of the start of the second period, where at one point the shots were 7-0 in favor of the Canucks, outside of 10 minutes there, Canadiens really had the decisive upper hand.
Quinn Hughes. Let's talk about Quinn Hughes, who quite clearly is playing hurt. We talked about how Irfan Gaffar reported that it was a hand injury. I think he might be right about that, based on what we saw last night. Amazon, of course, broadcasts warm-up. Quinn takes off his left glove, and you see, I called it an apparatus in instant reaction. You see quite the contraption on that left hand. I sent this to a doctor friend and said, hey, what's he dealing with? And he said, that's probably just a fractured hand, but he's also got some bandage on the finger as well. I said, okay, well, is it safe for him to play through this? And he's like, yeah, unless you get slashed on the hand really hard, or you, again, like, you know, with hockey gloves, how when you bend your knuckles, it kind of exposes that part, right? When you're holding the stick, it exposes that part of your knuckles. Unless you get slashed when you're holding your stick, like, it could go poorly, of course, but ultimately at the end of the day, and I saw people, criticizing Canucks medical staff and whatever. My take on this, Harm, is that in every sport, players are always going to play through injuries, and quite frankly, when players come back from injury, they're actually never really 100%. Like, I think when you have these off-the-record conversations with players, I think in any sport, to be honest with you, I know what happens in baseball. I've talked with players, not just on the Canucks, that this is something that happens where it's like you don't actually wait till you're 100% because you're never really 100% before returning. There's ready to play, and there's I've had 3 months in the offseason rest, and I'm 100% ready to go for the start of the season. And usually players aren't, like I said, players aren't at that point where they're 100%, quote unquote, unless it's the start of the season. And even then, you see a guy like JT Miller. JT Miller was 100% start this season, and you see that all the time. Hughes thinks he's good enough to go. Obviously, the Canucks medical staff has approved him to play. And I'm not just saying, yeah, let players decide when they're ready to go. I understand why there are medical staffs, but I'm just saying I'm not looking at this and saying like people are making it seem like the Canucks like, Quinn, you got to get out there. Like, we know you're not ready to go, but you got to get out there. Like, Quinn feels he's ready to play, and that's why he's in the lineup.
Yeah, and this is what I was mentioning on yesterday's show was we know that Quinn Hughes is going to have an incredible impact the moment he returns to the lineup, which he did. But are we going to get the 100% version of Hughes, or are we going to get 80 to 85% of him, let's say? Whatever hypothetical number you want to throw out there. And I think both things are true, that immediately upon his return, he was really impactful in transition. He had good looks offensively. He was doing his thing, skating, even breaking plays up defensively. And yet, understandably so, he wasn't as dominant as maybe we're used to, which the bar for Quinn Hughes to play when he's at 100%, the standard that he has for himself is higher than it is for any other defenseman in the league. 80%, Quinn Hughes operating at 80% of himself is still better than 95% of NHL defensemen. That's the version we saw of him last night. But also, this Canucks team is almost kind of reliant on that 100% version of Quinn Hughes. And so I am curious to see how quickly he can get to that 100% dominant version of him again. I think for a first game back, it was pretty solid, all things considered. But you did see moments where he wasn't fully comfortable. And I think even just defensively away from the puck. I don't know if you noticed this, but the broadcast sort of, I think Thomas Hickey pointed out that sometimes in little 50-50 battles as well, where you need to deliver like little cross checks, that's where with the hand, he might be a little bit more limited. And I was looking for that, where let's say there was a forward in front of the net and Quinn was trying to like box out or tie guy stick up or win some type of battle. He wasn't able to apply a lot of force. And again, I don't think that had a huge impact on his performance, but it was noticeable, at least to me, that normally he'd be playing with a little bit more hardness away from the puck.
That's interesting that you bring that up, because the way I look at injuries is it's like, how much are you thinking about this? And I mean, like, we both played sports growing up. How much are you thinking about an injury? And in a sport like hockey, where everything is bang bang, like, you don't have time to think and be like, oh, actually, my hand hurts. So this thing that I normally do, I can't do this. You don't have that time. Quinn might, because he thinks the game so much faster than everybody else. But that's another thing that when we talk about injuries, that's something that comes to mind for me is, okay, you're not at 100%, but how much are you thinking about this injury? And usually when guys aren't thinking about an injury as much, that's when they'll return, when they're like, okay, I can play and I know I can do and play the way I want to. I think that was actually a direct quote from Quinn when he was talking to IMAC was, I feel like I'm ready to play it, but before I could have played, he said he could have played through this injury from the start, but did say that he didn't feel like he'd be able to be the player that he needs to be if he tried to play through it. So we'll see. That thing on his hand definitely suggests that he's not fully healed from whatever it is on his hand that he's dealing with. Maybe a fracture, we don't know. But you're hoping that it just continues to heal. And I think ultimately, when a guy plays through something, you're just hoping that it doesn't stop the healing process or it doesn't make it worse.
Absolutely. Also, I thought I thought Myers for the most part had a pretty good game as well.
Yep.
Like that pair was effective, and the other pairs, as we usually suspect with the Canucks bottom four, were a liability for many shifts.
I think Vincent Desharnais still simplified his game. I think that's evident. Like, I think he had another decent game.
Maybe, but he also, if you remember, I think it may have been in the third period, had that play where he got double teamed
yes.
and threw a pass right into the middle of the slot for a Canadian scoring chance.
Okay, but that's one instance. We had about 7 of those every game. That's what I'm saying. That's all I'm saying is he's stepping in the right direction. And I thought last night, again, you're right, it was a scoring chance against, but I also look at Susie and say, like, he's the guy that, in my mind, like, I don't want to say Susie lost them the game, but he was their worst defenseman last night. Ice time reflected that, I think. I know we were talking about the second period turnover, the bad sequence he had where he got hemmed in the defensive end after failing to clear the puck, after a bad pinch as well. There was another one, I also think it was in the second period, where they didn't get burned. They didn't get scored on because it was Montreal trying to convert on them, but like any other team converts that chance because Susie makes a very similar play to the one that you just talked about where they actually did get burned. So again, not to take the conversation away, but I did want to say, I thought Vinny, if we had to pick a third best defenseman for the Canucks last night, I thought Vinny was him.
Sure.
Awesome,
the bar for the third best defenseman is like at the floor right now.
Look, I'm giving my love to Vinny. I like Vinny Desharnais. I think he's starting to turn it around. He's a good personality.
I agree. Over the last couple of weeks, he's been better, but also, man, you are in trouble as a team if you're proclaiming Vinny Desharnais as, oh, he might have been the third best defenseman last night.
That is a good take. That is great news for Vinny Desharnais. Bad news for the Canucks. Okay, Kevin Lankinen. Let's talk here, Harm. 5 goals against. Anytime you let in 5, that's not great. He wasn't spectacular by any means, but he made some spectacular saves in that game. It's hard to sit there and criticize the goaltender, but I think on the third Montreal goal, definitely wanted to have that one back. Anytime you get beat 5-hole, you want to have it back. But didn't love Kevin Lankinen's game. Thought it was one of those games where... Actually, no, I don't think that's fair to say. Usually I say in a game like this, goaltender was fine, but you would like to see him make that big save that he made for them earlier in the season. Kevin Lankinen did make some big saves last night. So I don't know how much I want to focus on Lankinen. He didn't stand out to me as a great story in this game. I'll say that.
He was average, right? He again, that Doc goal is a bad one, but he also made some brilliant stops. And ultimately, to me, if you ignore the goaltenders on both sides, most people would agree, and the numbers back it up, that the Canadiens were the better team at controlling play. They generated more high danger chances. They spent more time in the Canucks' end. To be honest, the Canucks didn't deserve to win that game with the way that they played. They were really only lifted by a heroic effort and performance by JT Miller and his line. Outside of that, I mean, you look at the Canucks middle 6 forward group, for example, the Garland line, the Bluger line, they were completely invisible in my mind and were caved in really badly for most of the night.
Yep. Yep. I think it's all fair. I think it's all very fair. Hulson is in the chat. The puck going in off Hulson's skate was unfortunate, says John Pochek in the chat. Is that Nick Pochek's like brother or cousin? Dude, is Nick getting his whole family to watch the show? We got another Pochek in the chat here. Anyways, puck going in off Hulson's skate was unfortunate. I don't like Hulson. I don't want to see it ever again. I don't like it. It gets a 0 out of 10. 0 big booms from me. But I will say that goal was especially unfortunate. And also, remember when Noah Juleson got some crap from Rick Tocchet postgame when a puck went off his skate in a very similar one? It was, yeah, you can't be standing in the blue paint. You need to box out better. No one was really around Quinn. He was just too close to the blue paint. So, Quinn Hughes, was he the problem last night? Harman, your take.
I think Jacob clipped that. Don't just that 5-second part of him asking that question.
No context whatsoever.
It just posted on social media.
Yeah. Quinn Hughes is the problem.
I think the fan base will give you an emphatic response.
Sounds like all the clips that go out on Facebook based on how they react to them. Anyways, okay, let's get to just other takeaways from that game, Harm. One that I had and one I wanted to talk about was Brock Besser. Just want to see more from him. Miller was so good in that game. Would have liked to have seen more from Besser. That's all. That's all I have on that. Just want to see more from Besser. Contract year, you're looking for 8x8, whatever you're looking for. Man, it's hard to justify that with a game like last night.
Sure, but he's I don't know. Like I'm curious to look it up now. I feel like he, for the most part, yeah, he's had quiet nights, but you're a player who, yeah, he hasn't scored in 3 games, but before that, he had scored in 4 straight games, including a couple multi-goal performances. So it's the ebbs and flows of a goal scorer, and he's the type of player that, because he's not a speedy puck transporter, because he's not a natural playmaker, when he's not scoring, you don't really notice him.
Yep.
So would you have liked to seen more from Besser in that game? For sure, but he's been productive over the last 10 games or so. And to me, it's like he's gonna have off nights. Every 30-40 goal scorer they're not gonna score every game.
Okay. Final thing before we get to our quarter century lineups, which we wanted to get to here. Lane Hutson, 3-point night for him. Now leads all rookies in scoring. What looked like a pretty clear Calder race. Like, I think we both picked Matvei Michkov to win the Calder at the start of the year. Then we said, okay, well, here's this Macklin Celebrini kid. I mean, Jacob at the start was saying Lane Hutson, of course.
Yeah, I was going to say, yes, you guys both picked Matvei Michkov, and I picked the guy you see on screen.
Yeah, okay. Lane Hutson, 3-point night. He leads all rookies in scoring. I did want to say, though, like, when's the last time we had a legitimate 3-horse race for the Calder? And I know I'm putting you on the spot. I'm asking the chat. I'm asking Jacob. I don't know the answer. Usually it's a pretty clear 2, and then you say, okay, well, there's this third guy, and I think you could make the argument, Jacob just did in our little private chat here. He said it's a 4-horse race with Wolf. I don't think Wolf is really going to be a legitimate horse, Wolf, if you will, in that race. I don't think he's going to be a legitimate, like, top 3 finalist if he's not leading the Flames to the playoffs, if that makes sense. If they don't make the playoffs, I don't think Dustin Wolf lands on the top 3 of many people's.
Well, what you don't think they're gonna? What you don't think your wags are? You think they're gonna miss the playoffs?
I said
finally coming around.
I said if in the unlikely event they don't make the playoffs,
preceded by you saying, "Oh, I don't think he's really gonna be part of the conversation because unless he guides them to the playoffs, he's not gonna be top 3."
I'm saying, okay. Anyways, you get my point. When's the last time we had a real top 3 race like this, where it's 3 guys that it could be anyone's right now? Like, if someone, let's put it this way, if someone put Brock Besser or Matt Barzal first on their ballot in that Calder year, understandable. You can make a case for both guys. If someone in Clayton Keller, you're like, okay, do you like are you Clayton Keller's mom? Do you do you really like Clayton Keller? You cover the Coyotes. Like there's a okay if thing there. With this one, I think you can justify putting all three of these guys, at least at this point. You can justify all three of those guys at number one on your ballot. You can't justify Dustin Wolf, I don't think, as number one on your ballot. That's the point that I'm trying to make, is that when we say it's a real 3-horse race, it legitimately is, where each guy could go number one on your ballot and you can make a real case for any of them. Harman, I'm pointing out the Calder. We don't see that for almost any award, I'd say, where you can make a case for three guys, maybe the Bing, but in terms of major awards, like
The Hart for sure.
the Hart,
Especially
you can
last
put
year.
three guys each year. Like I think last year was, again, like who's your three this year? I don't think we have it this year. I don't.
Last year though.
Sure. Last year's a good example. Last year's a really good example of that. But especially with the Calder, like we never see it, and we rarely see it. I should say rarely see it with major awards, but the Calder especially, like I legitimately can't remember. Jacob, have you found when the last time there was a legitimate 3-horse race for the Calder was?
I'm taking a look. I'll let you know if I see anything.
Dean in the chat says Tyler Myers beating out Matt Duchene and Jimmy Howard in 2010. Decent spread there. Decent spread on votes there. This is shaping up to be one of the closest ones. Certainly the closest one that I can remember. In fact, as someone who votes on the awards, like I won't say today who I even have number one on my ballot, because I think there's a legitimate case for all three. Maybe I'm leaning toward Macklin Celebrini, but man, if Lane Hutson leads all rookies in points, how can you not go with the defenseman? I'm sure I would if Quinn Hughes did that, right? Like, how can you not go with the defenseman? So with that, Jacob Lazar gets to take a huge victory lap because it's January 7th, and I am conceding that Lane Hutson is probably the favorite for the Calder right now.
I'm not taking the victory lap yet. I'll wait till it actually happens. But when it does, you guys were all over me back in our season preview video. I will take a well-deserved quads level victory lap if he holds on.
But Harman, seriously, this Calder race, it's just good. It's good for the game. It's entertaining to watch.
Absolutely. I would lean towards it. Like if I had to rank the top three right now, I'd lean Celebrini, Hudson, and then Michkov.
So why Celebrini over Hudson? The two-way play?
Yes, but also it's Celebrini's played fewer games. That's why he's not leading the rookie race in points. And I believe over the balance of the season that he probably will end up leading rookies in points is what I'm sort of banking on. I also think that while Hudson looked Quinn Hughes-esque last night, first 10, 15, 20 games, he definitely had his fair share of defensive lapses. And I don't think it's been too bad because at 5-on-5, the Canadians are still +1 with him on the ice. So it's not as if they're bleeding excess goals against, but his defensive numbers haven't always been great. He, made some loud mistakes earlier on in the season. I think he's definitely improving as the year is going on. And if he, put it this way, if he maintains the type of play that he's shown in the last 20 games over the remainder of the entire second half, then I think he's got a really good case of maybe overtaking Celebrini. But if we're just looking at each player's performance to this point, I think Celebrini's been more complete and he's got the higher point per game average too.
I like it. As long as
I found the last legitimate 3-horse race here.
Tell me.
So back in 2016, obviously Connor McDavid had a great start to the year and then had his season-ending injury. So he finished third in Calder voting, but still picked up 25 first-place votes. Panarin did have the most first-place votes. He was pretty clear number one, but Gostisbehere and McDavid were both right in behind him, and that's the closest thing we've seen in quite a few years to a 3-horse race.
I love it. So, 2024, almost 10 years later, we are seeing one. Speaking of years, let's get to our quarter century lineups. Let's just make this a part of anyone else, which is brought to you by our friends over at Greta, a great spot for all games, home and away. And folks, it is time. come down to Greta Bar YVR for a thrilling evening presented by Fountain Tire as we watch Vancouver take on Edmonton. There's going to be exciting giveaways, including hockey tickets, signed memorabilia, and jerseys to be won. Doors open at 5 p.m. and puck drop is at 6 p.m. Each ticket grants you access to all the action, and it's all in support of One Broken Biker. Our VIP four-person reservation includes entry into the event, a Greta burger and beverage, plus a game card. Don't miss out. Secure your spot now at nationgear.ca for an action-packed night with us, the Canucks Army crew. Jacob, if we can get that link in podcast, YouTube, I'm sure you've already done it because you're so on top of things, but
it's actually it's not in the YouTube yet, but it will be by the time the majority of people watch this.
Beautiful. January 23rd, come out. It's going to be a lot of fun. 6 p.m. puck drop. I'm excited. Our first one was a ton of fun. This one's going to be a ton of fun as well. Maybe I'll do another hit on Rinkwide. Never know. I like doing those. That was a lot of fun. So, Harman, are you going to be able to make that one?
Probably, yeah.
Okay, cool. I was worried Drance sent you, was going to send you to Edmonton. That used to be our thing, was our first road trip of the year together, was you and I would be in Edmonton. Good times. But we're going to be at Greta for that one. Going to be a lot of fun. Okay, let's get to our quarter century lineups. Folks, if you haven't heard it already, the NHL is unveiling the quarter century lineups for every team. The Canucks don't come out until later this month, but I thought it'd be fun to kind of preview and do lineups of our own. Teams that have been announced, you see like the Leafs have already been announced. There's others as well, but basically the criteria is the best players from the past 25 years. From 2000 on, each team's best players, they're highlighting the best players during that time period. So with this lineup, you're not going to get Pavel Bure. We're not putting Trevor Linden on it because when Trevor Linden played during that time with the Canucks, he wasn't a spectacular Canuck. His best years with the Canucks were in the 90s, obviously. So we don't have Trevor Linden on, but we thought it'd be fun to go over this exercise and let's see what we came up with. Jacob, how do you want to do this? Do you want to start with one at a time? How did you make it?
I have the order I have it to make it work nicely is Quad's first team, Harman first team, Quad second team, Harman second team. So
perfect.
Let's
do that. Let's do that. I could have asked you that before the show. My apologies, but let's get to my first team. Again, I wanted to reiterate, this is just position. It doesn't matter. Handedness doesn't matter. Whether you're a center or a winger, doesn't matter. It's forward. 3 forwards, 2 defensemen, and a goalie twice. So first team, second team. My first team, I've got the Sedins, obviously, and then I have Marcus Naslund, Quinn Hughes, and Alex Edler with Roberto Luongo in net.
Yeah, that's great. The only change I had was Olin instead of Edler for that second D spot, which I think they're interchangeable. I think either guy is totally justified in that spot.
Yeah, and we're not going to nitpick over things like, oh, you put Olin over Edler, but I did have Edler over Olin because I think there's some significance with being on the first team. That being said, I also saw, did you see this? Phil Kessel put on the second team, Mitch Marner on the Leafs first team. I don't like that. Give me Phil Kessel on the first team every day of the week. Okay. I'm getting sidetracked. Let's go to my, let's go to my second team. I've got Elias Pettersson, JC Miller, and Todd Bertuzzi, Ed Jovanovski, Matthias Ohlund, and Thatcher Demko in net. My final cuts, I had Morrison, Salo, Kluche. Let's take a look at Harms.
First of all, Kluche is a final cut.
Yeah,
he was good.
Who else would you put as a goalie final cut?
Jacob Markstrom.
Oh, that is a good one.
You could almost even argue Ryan Miller as well.
You know what's interesting? You know what's interesting? I put Kluche because I was like, you know what? I want to give Dan Kluche some love because he never gets love. Those teams made the playoffs. They didn't do much in the playoffs because of Dan Kluche. They probably made the playoffs in spite of Dan Kluche at the end of the day. So, okay, that's fair. I might have been wrong about that. I probably shouldn't have Kluche as a cut. Let's get to your second team, Harm.
Yeah, only difference among the forwards there was I had Kessler instead of Bertuzzi. Again, same sort of thing. Bertuzzi, when he was at his best, was probably the most dominant power forward in the NHL at the time. You could pick him, or you could pick the 40-goal scoring Selke guy. They're both excellent, I think, options in that spot. And then Jovo, and then I had Edler instead of Oland on my second team.
I don't think there's a wrong answer. Who do you think actually makes the team? Like, do you think your team is going to be what's announced when they announce it in January?
I don't know. I genuinely don't know what the actual quarter century team is going to be.
We're 2 weeks away from it. They're going to announce it. And I'm trying to figure out what's actually going to come of it. Like, what's going to be the final team? Are they going to go with Todd Bertuzzi? Long history there. The reason I had Bertuzzi on the team is just that, like you said, at his peak, he was one of the most dominant players in the league. He's an interesting one because the lockout kind of stopped all his progression right when, like, really that lockout year could have realistically been the best year of his career. And then when they got back, there was all new rules that were anti-Todd Bertuzzi by the time they got back. So he's an interesting one. He's a really interesting one. I will say I don't know how much it matters. Again, Kessler won Selkes. He was a super important part of this franchise. But like Todd Bertuzzi was part of the reason that the Canucks came back from that super dark era of Canucks hockey. I would make the argument that Todd Bertuzzi was more important to the franchise, and I know there's a lot of history with the franchise. Did some bad things. Did a bad thing that obviously hurt the franchise, but I would make the argument that Todd Bertuzzi, if we're looking at greatest Canucks of all time, might be greater than Ryan Kessler. I think I would be willing to make that argument solely based on him bringing them out of that dark era, being instrumental. And that goes for all the West Coast Express, which is ultimately why I had Brendan Morrison as a cut ahead of Ryan Kessler. That I'd definitely be willing to argue with and say Ryan Kessler may be more deserving of Brendan Morrison as my final cut, my honorable mention. But I am going to say Bertuzzi. I am pretty confident in Bertuzzi, at least for me. But I think you might be right. I think your team is actually what's going to be announced. I think they'll announce Kessler over Bertuzzi.
Yeah, I again, to me, you're splitting hairs there. I also just view Kessler as part of that golden era of the 2011 Canucks. Not that he was the best player, obviously, on that 2011 team, but going to the Stanley Cup final is massive, and he was a monster in that playoff run too. So again, you're splitting hairs. I don't think there's a wrong answer there. Plus, I think because of the incident, league is probably more likely to put Kessler on that quarter century team.
Yep. There's no wrong answers except for Dan Kluche. That was fun. I'm glad we did that, Harm. That was good. Let's get to throughout the rest of anyone else. Let's get to some other stuff.
So hold on before you move on, and I'm actually going to turn my video on for this one. So Harman told a story on the show yesterday about when he sent a letter to Alex Ovechkin. So Quads, you bring up Brendan Morrison. I have a very similar story. So when I was maybe like 5 or 7 years old, my dad actually met Brendan Morrison out in public, and he talked to him and said, "Hey, my son and I are huge fans. Do you think you could sign an autograph for him?" And Brendan did. And my dad, being a good father, wanting to preach the importance of education, asked Brendan to mention in the autograph like college hockey was great, and he enjoyed that. So I got an autograph. Dear Jacob, college hockey was great. Good luck, Brendan Morrison. And I remember he came home. I got it. It was like the coolest thing. I was holding it and so happy. And I decided I'm going to write a thank you letter. So I wrote a thank you letter. My mom put it into an envelope for me. We went to the mailbox and I mailed it. I don't remember if I got something back. I think I got like we passed it along to Brendan. Go Canucks go, a little thing from the team. Well, years later, I've actually met Brendan Morrison twice since then, and I haven't said anything. Like the first time I was working for a U18 AAA team. We were in Calgary for a tournament, and our team captain, who was from Pitt Meadows, probably saw tons of photos of Brendan Morrison in the arena growing up. He calls me over. He's like, "Is that Brendan Morrison?" And yeah, Brendan Morrison was just like at a game with his son in Calgary. And I walk up, I'm like, "Hey, you're Brendan Morrison, right?" And he's like, "Yeah. I've got a team of like 15, 16-year-olds from Vancouver who were asking me to come over and say something." And I couldn't be like, "By the way, while you go say hi to all these 15-year-olds, do you remember when I sent you that thank you letter 20 years ago?" And then the second time was I was producing Rink Wide in the playoffs last year, and we had Brendan Morrison on for a game to co-host. And again, it's like, "Okay, Brendan, we're going live in 3 minutes. By the way, thanks for that awesome autograph you gave me back in 2004. I hope you got my thank you letter." So maybe third time's a charm. I'll get to finally bring it up to him one day.
We'll bring him on the show. We'll bring him on the show, and I'll bring it up. I won't tell you that I'm going to. I'll just bring it up. Like, Jacob has something he wants to say to you, Brendan.
Great guy, Brendan Morrison, though. Like, just an absolutely stand-up dude.
The day I hear someone say something bad about Brendan Morrison will be the first time I ever hear anybody say a bad thing about Brendan Morrison. People in the chat are already sharing their experiences with Brendan Morrison, saying he's a great dude. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Jacob. That's awesome. That's really good. We'll get him on the show. We'll get him on the show soon. Big fisherman, Brendan Morrison. Okay, let's go to... Oh, no, we're already in anyone else. See, I got to get it going here. Okay, Syndicat said Bertuzzi would have been on that list if not for the incident. Yeah, I think you kind of mentioned that, Harm. If that wasn't something that was at the forefront of the NHL's mind, he might be on that list, but I think you're right. With your pick of Kessler. Okay, yeah, there's another one in here. Nigel Joycey asking about our exercise, the quarter century lineup. He said, what's the point of all this? Is it just theoretical? They aren't actually going to play, are they? There's an idea. Make your lineup of players that are going to play. Like, they have to face off against every other team's lineup. I mean, probably going with a lot of active players, but...
I mean, all active players.
No, not all.
Yeah.
Not all.
What former player is going to... Like, you could take a third-line NHL player, and he will dust like a 45-year-old Hall of Famer.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah.
Didn't Luongo stop Mitch Marner at the All-Star competition?
I don't know. It's an all-star competition.
I'm just asking. I'm asking if you're aware.
I don't remember, but
it
sure.
happened. No, it happened. It
okay.
happened. Yeah, it happened. So I'm just saying. Are you just... Oh, you're just saying Mitch Marner's a fraud. Worse than a third liner is what I'm hearing.
Yeah,
okay,
definitely.
Cool. I just need to clarify. Okay.
By the way, you know what team would have a nasty quarter century team?
Tell me.
Colorado.
Oh,
because
yes, they would.
Like, I mean, with their active players, you got McKinnon, you got Rantanen, you got Makar, you got Taves, but also you've got Joe Sakic, you've got Peter Forsberg, you've got Patrick Waugh, you've got like Rob Blake, Adam Foote. Like, their team, like their quarter century team would be nasty.
The only thing they're missing is a second team goalie. It's going to be like
Mackenzie Blackwood,
David Abisher.
Kemper's not bad. He's not
Kemper,
great, but for a
Yeah.
second team goaltender, you could do worse than Kemper.
I'm trying to think who is the best team, and I think you figured it out, Harm. I think it's Colorado. Like, New Jersey maybe comes to mind a little bit, but Colorado still wipes the floor with them. Colorado's the best team, I think. When you look at, if we actually were pitting all these lineups against each other, Colorado by a million. That's a good one. I didn't think of that exercise of who is the best team if you put them all on the ice together. I love it. That's great. Did I have anything else? I feel like I had one final thing I wanted to mention. Oh yeah, let's talk about this, Harm. Your colleague at The Athletic, Josh Yohe. Am I pronouncing that right? How do you pronounce it? Yohe? Okay, cool. He reported that the New York Rangers offered Mika Zibanejad to the Canucks for JT Miller. The Canucks said no. No real surprise there. Mika Zibanejad is not as good as JT Miller, but your reaction to that news?
So I'd heard this rumor about a month or two ago, and it's not a serious trade offer, especially given how poorly Zibanejad has played, particularly at 5-on-5 this year. Zibanejad on that contract and at his age is a negative value asset. You could offer him up for free, and I'd be in a position where if I was controlling Canucks, I would not want Mika Zibanejad at that contract. So to say let's give you this aging, declining centerman who can't really drive play at 5-on-5 anymore for a guy who as recently as last season scored 102 points and was a two-way monster, that's just not a serious trade-off.
No, it's not realistic. Are you okay? Now here's the thing. When we talk about JT Miller trade, or when other people talk about it, trade proposals, Mika Zibanejad's always in them when it's the Rangers, right? What do you think of Mika Zibanejad, the player, being a part of a package? Like, how much would need to be added for you to be like, yeah, okay, I'm fine with the Canucks getting Mika Zibanejad?
There is no trade proposal with Zibanejad in it. That contract is toxic. It's got so much term left on it. And there were points last year where he went like 30 games without scoring a 5-on-5 goal. And he only has 8 goals and 24 points this season. Like, his line is a massive reason the Rangers have fallen off this year. He's the most disappointing player relative to expectations, I worry that he's only going to get worse. Like, his underlying numbers are ugly. The Rangers have only controlled about 45% of shot attempts with him on the ice. They've been outscored by 10 goals during his 5-on-5 minutes. He looks washed this season.
He's going to be a free agent at 37. The Canucks don't need another contract that they're going to buy out. And that was kind of the theme that I saw when I was looking at this, was just like, this just feels like another OEL, where I know the Canucks are kind of on the other end of it, where they're probably the one giving up the big piece, quote unquote, in a trade. But man, I really do think that this is one that would just hurt the Canucks and ultimately be one that they would have to buy out. It just wouldn't work long term. So I agree with you. I honestly agree with you. And I don't think there's enough assets to make you be like, okay, this is fine. Let's do that.
Like $8.5 million cap hit, and he's only in year 3 of an 8-year deal like that.
Yeah. 37, dude. 37.
No
and
chance.
declining. Like that's the other thing, is like, people say, well, JT Miller's going to be old when his thing ends as well. His contract ends. Yeah, I get that. But in fact, JT Miller's going to be 37 as well. But JT Miller's not declining. He might decline. Still lesser cap hit, still a more impactful player, and there are legitimate reason to believe, with what we've seen the past 2 seasons, including this one, of course, that Mika Zibanejad is just washed. Like, it's over. It's over for Mika Zibanejad. There's tons of reason to believe that. You might think otherwise. That's fine. Are you willing to give up an asset to bring that in? I say no. I don't like that at all.
Yeah, nothing to really add beyond that.
Now, one thing I want to ask you. Do you know the name Zach Jones?
Yep.
Defenseman? Okay, I didn't. Brimpy Schwingle in the chat said, did the Rangers have any realistic D-man targets for the Canucks? Zach Jones was someone we highlighted over at Canucks Army the other day. He's going to be a low-stakes guy. He's clearing the Brandstrom bar. Like, he's probably going to be an upgrade on Eric Brandstrom and going to be a guy on the third pair that can move the puck. Immediately, I say no, because the Canucks have enough third-pairing defensemen, but what they don't have are third-pairing defensemen who can move the puck and play solid defense, and I think Zach Jones might be that.
I don't think Jones is a bad player, but this coaching staff is never going to trust him. He's 5'11", and he is prone to ups and downs defensively. I don't think he's noticeably better than Eric Brandstrom. Might be a bit better, but I don't think he's significantly better. And look at Brandstrom's fate, where he's been in and out of the lineup, even with the Canucks' desperate need for puck movers. So Jones he's a 6'7" defenseman.
Okay, so marginal upgrade, not worth giving up an asset at the end of the day, is I think where we're going with this. Okay. Well, there goes that idea. Let's get to this one. I want to give some World Junior takes. We said we'd have Dave on today. We pushed Dave to tomorrow. Dave's going to join us tomorrow. J-Pat's going to join us on Thursday. But I did want to give some quick World Junior takes. People are asking about Axel Sandin-Pellikka over Tom Willander. You know, that conversation is always going to happen, especially after that tournament. Tom Willander was great. I saw Cam Robinson put him as one of his best defensemen of the tournament over Axel Sandin-Pellikka. And I'm not going to rag on ASP. It's just that, like, since his draft year, and again, I'm going by the word of Chris Faber. Chris Faber mentioned, check it off the bingo card. In his draft year, that was the thing that Chris was telling me and writing over at Canucks Army, was like, does really good against junior players, is struggling to defend as soon as he goes to the SHL, is struggling to defend as soon as the guys get bigger, as soon as the opposition gets tougher. That's where he starts to struggle. So, at a tournament like the World Juniors, yes, he's going to put up a lot of points. I'm not looking at that and saying, oh my gosh, the Canucks should have taken ASP over Tom Willander. I wish ASP all the best. I am just going to keep going off that. If Cam Robinson likes a player, if Chris doesn't like a player, not saying Chris liking Tom Willander means anything to me now for obvious reasons, but Chris liking Tom Willander in his draft year and not liking ASP, I look at that and I say, okay, what I just saw at the World Juniors doesn't change my opinion if that was my opinion of him before.
I'll be honest, I'm not an ASP expert. I am wary sometimes of smaller defensemen when they put up ridiculous numbers in junior, but doesn't always translate at the pro level. Although he's having a tremendous season, you can't ignore what he's doing this year, even outside of the World Juniors.
Yeah.
But again, I'm not an ASP expert. I'd be curious to get Dave's take.
Dave's take, and we'll get.
But again, it's irrelevant to the idea of, should the Canucks have taken him, because he's a small defenseman. There's no way that the Canucks would have been icing a decor with Hughes, Hronek, and ASP in the future.
Nope.
Exactly. Adam Foote would have a heart attack.
Okay, this one from Broomfield Shingle. I know we're going a little over time. Bear with me. I want to get back to World Juniors in a sec, talk about Canada. But Broomfield Shingle said this: is it harder to find a solid second pair D-man that is capable of playing first pair? Seems like everyone is either a third pair D-man or a first pair guy that costs big money. Can you find that in between? Can you give me an example of who an in-between guy might be?
Well, it's just that I think around the league right now, when you look at the way most contenders are positioned, there just aren't. There's a shortage of like quality top four defensemen just in general. I don't think it's necessarily a case of a second pair defensemen are disappearing. It's just the pool of top four defenders as a whole isn't very impressive, because you look around the league at a lot of contenders right now. A lot of the top teams, they have holes in their top four. I mean, the Rangers won the President's Trophy last year, and we know they're probably going to miss the playoffs this year, but their blue line's been an issue. Panthers won the Stanley Cup last year. They like their second pair right now on paper. And I know Aaron Ekblad and Nico Mikla are out of lineup right now, but it's Tobias Bjornfot and Uvis Balinskis. Their second pair on paper right now. And they're the defending Stanley Cup champions. The Dallas Stars might have one of the worst right sides in the NHL. Look at the Edmonton Oilers. There aren't many teams right now that have a complete, like, robust number 1 to 6 blue line that you look at and go, man, that is a championship quality defense. And we'll see how things evolve, but that's just the trend that I noticed heading into this season is there, like, there's not much separating, let's say, the 7th best and the 25th best blue line in the league right now.
That's a good way to put it.
There's just a lot of teams in the mushy middle. It's
almost like how the NHL standings are too. There's not a lot separating those teams in terms of points. There's not. I like how you put that though, Harm. I really do. I think I'm going to save my Team Canada World Juniors take for tomorrow when we have Dave on the show. I like to run it by him. But it kind of revolves around just how kids are coming up in this system. I'll hint at it and I guess say it. Like, I wonder if we see it change now that these players are allowed to play in the NCAA. Like, okay, Harm, how much better does Easton Cowan look if he's playing at Michigan instead of the OHL? In terms of his development, in terms of being a player. And I know you might not have the answer, but like that's the question that is coming up in my head. And I'm not trying to pin the World Juniors on Easton Cowan. I'm just saying that's the question that I've started to ask myself is like, is this NCAA agreement going to help? I think yes, it is.
Yeah, it's an interesting take. I'd be curious. I don't think it would have a major impact. I don't think it's anywhere near the top of the list for why the Canadian junior program has struggled over the last couple of years. We've seen countless examples, like tons and tons of players develop through the CHL. The CHL is still a great model for prospects to develop. There are advantages with the NCAA as far as older competition, more like just a higher level of hockey, generally speaking. But
like,
I don't think it makes a huge. I don't know.
Let's move past the NCAA because, like, Czechia, Harm, those kids are playing against men. They're playing in pro leagues in Czechia, and I'm not. Again, I don't want to go too far down this road because I think this is a great conversation to have with Dave. But like, I brought up the NCAA because that's obviously the one in Canada. Like, you know, you can't go play in the AHL. Like Easton Cowan or whoever, and we're using Cowan as the example, but like he can't go play in the AHL because of that agreement. So I'm thinking that the NCAA is going to help development in Canada because traditionally, and I love the BCHL, but like for the most part, the BCHL isn't the same quality of competition as the WHL is. So then those kids that were playing BCHL can go to the NCAA where the competition is better than it is in the WHL for the most part. Again, I'm talking like your Kent Johnsons, your guys that are going to Michigan. I understand that. Now that there's these options, I think this is really good for the players. This NCAA agreement, I think it's good for hockey in Canada. I love the BCHL. I don't want to see the BCHL hurt from this agreement. But that being said, like in terms of getting glory at the World Juniors, like this feels like a step in the right direction because you don't want to see Canada start getting lapped by places, like States, Czechia especially is the one that comes to mind. Like these guys are playing against men, even Sweden, like their programs are, these guys are playing against men if they're good enough and they're playing in the Allsvenskan or they're playing wherever.
I get where you're coming from. I ultimately think it's good for players to have that extra option.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, the much bigger issue is they just didn't pick the most talented team.
That's fair. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that you're going to point to. And I think the biggest thing that we're all going to point to is how they constructed that team, Dave Cameron coaching the team, all that sort of stuff. And I think that's the thing that can get addressed immediately. I'm also just saying that I wonder how much impact this agreement will have because these nations that are having their guys go to the best leagues available to them, they're lapping Canada. They're starting to, at least. Like, I'm not trying to, but it's back-to-back years getting bounced in the quarters. I'm starting to at least think about the path of development that these players are taking. And not to mention just like, not to pick on Easton Cowan too much, but like he's totally plateaued. He's back in London and he's putting up worse numbers than he was last year. Like, you want to develop at this age. This is Vasily Podkolzin levels of just stalling your development. Like, you want to see a guy progress every year. And again, I'm picking on Easton Cowan and I don't mean to, but like you want to see more. You want to see more from these prospects.
I'd love to keep doing this, but I'm getting a call from a GM.
All right.
I need to go.
We'll wrap it up there for my co-host. Oh, no. Harman, you dip. Yeah, Harman, you
got
dip.
Bet 365. So Harman's good to
See you
go.
guys.
Yeah, okay. Okay, chat. What call did who's calling Harman? I'm going to find out after.
Yeah.
GM calling Harman. Probably Tulski. Probably just Eric Tulski.
Yeah.
I'm gonna laugh if that's actually it. Okay, let's get to our Bet 365 bet of the day. All right, tonight, who do we like on the NHL? Ooh, okay. I'm trying to figure out what the Tampa Bay Lightning are. Like, are the Tampa Bay Lightning gonna force their way back into being contenders, Jacob? Like, what are the Tampa Bay Lightning? And I know we're going overtime, and I apologize for that, but like, what are the Tampa Bay Lightning? Yeah, what are the Tampa Bay Lightning? They're the first wildcard team right now. They might be able to snag the third division spot there in the Atlantic. What are the Tampa Bay Lightning?
Are they still leading the league in goals for as well? I think they are, or in goal differential. Like, they're up there as far as their offensive numbers.
Yeah, they're leading. They're leading in. They lead the Atlantic Division in goals for with 137, and they also. Only Washington has a higher goals for and higher goal differential than them.
Like they have the best goal differential by far. Like the Leafs are second best with a plus 16 and Tampa's double that at plus 32. So to answer your question, I think Tampa might be one of the two best teams in the Atlantic. Are they better than Florida? I don't know. Maybe they are.
Okay. Well, tonight we're betting that the Carolina Hurricanes are going to beat them. Minus 120, you can get the Hurricanes money line. It's Hurricanes, it's Lightning, it's on Bet365. That was our bet of the day, brought to you by Bet365, a proud partner of Canucks Conversation. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Be sure to use code NATION when you sign up for an account. Must be 19 plus to play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly. All right, we will wrap it up there. For my co-host, my departed co-host, Harman Dial, and our technical producer, Jacob Lazar, my name is Dave Widrelli. Thanks so much for this episode of Canucks Conversation. Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.